Thank you for the signal. All right. I'm finished talking anyway. So the format is to have the candidates give a 10 to 15 minute presentation on themselves and the office they're running for and why they're the most qualified for the office. And then we'll take questions from y'all at the end. So please, if you think of a question, jot it down and be sure to ask it. So I'll turn it over. Dr. King, would you like to start, please?
Sure. It's on? It's on. Okay. Good evening. My name is Wing Ng, and I'm running for re-election to the Wake County School Board. I represent District 3, which is part of this area. It's including the part of Wake Forest, North Raleigh, as well as an unincorporated part of Wake County. I'm running again after 2 years. I won 2 years ago, and it was truly a blessing. When I ran, it was right out after all the COVID and feeling that the parents, our parents, all of us being parents, our voices were not being heard. And so I wanted to see if I can make a difference. It's really a God's blessing that I won, because I felt like it was a very much an Esther moment for me. That if I were being able to be placed in a position where I have a platform, that I wanted to make sure that I use that platform wisely, and to that maybe that I was put in that position for such a time as this. For the last 2 years, I've been serving on the school board, and I've had a much better appreciation of the complexity of the school board and how it's run, and the responsibilities we have to educate the children of Wake County. I mean, our budget is obviously a huge. We have a $2.2 billion budget, and it is comprised of state money, federal money, as well as local money. And so we have to have a working relationship with both the Wake County commissioners, as well as with interaction with the General Assembly, to try to advocate for what's best for the children of Wake County in terms of education needs. For me personally, my platform, my things that I believe in has not changed. I believe in excellence in education, and I believe that all children, no matter what their economic background is, they deserve a good education. I myself came from a very poor family. I came from Hong Kong originally, and I came when I was 9 years old and settled in Texas, and I didn't know a word of English. And so I was enrolled in the public school in Texas, and went through ESL and all that, and really I firmly believe that public education was what got me to this point. I feel like this is my way of giving back to the community, giving back to a educational system that helped me so much. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a physician. I've been working here in Wake County for the last 19 years as a physician, and taking care of people with strokes and head injuries. I have 2 children, and one of them has Down syndrome. And so that really changed my life and changed my worldview. And that's actually, it really infused into my, what I want to do in the Wake County Public Schools. One of the things that are still, after my 2 years being in there, I know even more, and I feel like I need to stay in there to fight the fight, is that special education needs a lot of work. The amount of money that it's coming from the General Assembly to help with special education is based on a formula that hasn't been changed. since 1993. And so there's really a need to look at that. I mean, there's been inflation, there's been a surging rate of disabilities, autism rate has increased, there's a lot of emotional health needs. So there's really need to be a greater emphasis on how we can provide for our kids with special needs. And you know, the teachers that are dedicated to providing for our kids with special needs, they are getting burnt out. And you know, really the vacancy rate for teachers, if you look at the breakdown of it, the one that is affected the most is in special education. So the burnout is real, and I want to make sure that we are able to advocate to the General Assembly to get adequate funding in a way that makes sense for our, not just for Wake County, but for all the counties in North Carolina. The other things that I really believe in is looking at school safety. The recent surge in these episodes of bomb threats and things that affect the children. It really affects them emotionally, mentally. But in addition to the physical threat. And so, I want to make sure that, our schools are a safe place to be. And I want to make sure that, the buildings themselves are physically fortified in a way that, is safe for the kids, they feel safe. I want to make sure that the children are able to get a good education because they need to focus. Otherwise, if they're feeling like this threat is hovering over them, it's just going to be hard for them to focus. And it's really affecting their mental health. And, the other thing, the other flip side of it is, we really should take a closer look at the code of conduct and how we look at the way that we the disciplinary actions that need to happen if somebody were to break a rule. It's the reason that we need to look at it is children do need to know that there is consequence to actions if they are doing something that is a threat to other children, that they need to know that there is a consequence to the actions. And not to say that we are going to be targeting any particular people, but certainly if somebody does something that is harmful for another person, that needs to be really looked at seriously. And the other thing that I'm passionate about is just looking at how we deal with the way that our schools are set up. Transportation has been one of the factors that's been really affecting our ability to provide education for our kids, because if they can't get to school, or if they have to take an hour ride to school on the bus, it's just really hard. And some of the areas most affected are the ones that really have difficulty with access to transportation to begin with. Either the parents, they rely on bus transportation, and if they don't have another way of getting their kids to school. So if the bus transportation is difficult for them, it is going to be difficult for the kids to go to school. And so I want to take a look at how we look at the providing for the transportation for the kids. Bus drivers recently, the school board did provide a increase in the salary to $20 an hour to try to be competitive to other options for the bus drivers may have. and we're hoping that we can attract more bus drivers to be able to provide a greater fleet of buses that can make the routes be not so long. So yeah, there's a lot of issues that we have to deal with, both financially, also personnel, teachers. We want to make sure that the teachers are having a salary that is able to provide for their own family. So we recently also helped with increasing the teacher salary as well, and we try to look at the whole big picture, and unfortunately there's sometimes I feel like we're just kind of putting out fires all the time, so I think that my job is not done, and I want to stay on the school board to help with improving what we already have, and I feel like my experience so far in the last 2 years gives me the ability to continue smoothly to work on improving the school system. So, thank you.
Can you get one of those microphones, guys, and put them on the podium? You guys can pass the other ones around.
Mike, you want to go ahead?
Sure.
Well, thank you, Tom, and thank you all for opening up your doors and allowing us to do this here. It was a fantastic opportunity. My name is Mike Sheetzelt. If you've seen, we've already got some signs out, so if you've seen the weird German name out there, it rhymes with seatbelt. Don't be afraid of it. Mike Sheetzelt, and I'm running for House District 35. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm a father of 4 boys that I'm raising in Wake Forest, and I'm an attorney in Raleigh, a civil litigator. I'll take just a little bit of time to tell you about my background, why I'm running, and my priorities. I'd like to leave as much time as I can for questions. But my background, I would say, is multidisciplinary. I started out as a professional musician. I played trumpet for Carnival Cruise Lines and for Busch Gardens. I played then professionally for 4 years in the Marine Corps, where I sounded taps at Arlington National Cemetery and played with the Commandant's own United States Marine Drum and Bugle Corps. And it was there in the Marine Corps, performing in Washington, D.C., you're standing in front of a lot of powerful people, frankly. It kind of changed my life. It was July of 2014, maybe June of 2014, and we played a concert for President Obama. And to see him 30 feet away from me, 40 feet away from me, when he'd only ever been a talking head on television, changes your perspective of what you're capable of. And it was in that moment that I realized God was calling me to do more with my life than be the dinner entertainment for powerful politicians in D.C. So I went to law school. I'd had a passion for law when I was a high schooler. I wanted to go to law school, and then I figured out it was 3 more years of school, and quickly lost that idea. But so I went to law school. I graduated from Duke University, and since then I have served with the Supreme Court of North Carolina as a law clerk, a research assistant, helping them draft opinions and research areas of the law. I worked for 1 year in public policy and helped pass a bill on criminal law reform in North Carolina to try and simplify the criminal code and make it easier to administer and less likely to ensnare people who didn't even know they were doing anything wrong. I went from that to teaching law school. I spent 2.5 years at Virginia Beach, splitting my time between Wake Forest and Virginia Beach, but teaching in Regent University, where I taught First Amendment law and became a constitutional law scholar. For somebody who hated school, being a scholar was kind of an interesting career path. But anyway, I left that, and I've been in private practice now in Raleigh for the last several years. So that's my background. Why am I in this race? I would give you 3 reasons. I like 3s. The first reason is that I love this state. I was raised here. I was raised by a single father who, frankly, we did not have much in the way of means, in the way of money. There often wasn't a whole lot of food on the table. My clothes rarely fit, and our heat was shut off just about every single winter. I don't know that I would be where I am today if my neighbors and friends and fellow churchgoers hadn't stepped up and taken care of my brother and me. They provided us money when we needed food, when we needed clothes. They gave us food when we needed food. They took us to church. They made sure we were cared for. They invested in our lives. North Carolinians took very good care of me growing up. And now that I'm in this position, when I was approached about running for this seat, it only made sense that I stepped up to take care of North Carolinians. I'm looking right now above the doorway at the words "depart to serve." That's why we're in this. We're here to serve North Carolinians. We're here to serve Wake County, and I'm here to serve District 35. The second reason I am running for this seat is because I think we face serious challenges in this state that require serious people. We have issues where, maybe our revenue looks like it might plateau in a few years. We have to be prepared for that. We have to find ways to expand our revenue base. Dr. Ng mentioned the outdated formula that we're using to allocate special needs money. We also have an outdated formula for how we're allocating infrastructure money. There are a lot of challenges that we face. We've got to have serious people who are stepping up with serious ideas on how to tackle these issues. Based on my background in public policy and my time serving in my communities, I like to think I'm a serious person who brings serious ideas to the table. That's for the voters to decide. The third reason, and it's kind of interrelated, is that, to be completely honest, I'm disgusted with the current state of our political culture. I don't like the vitriol. I don't like the constant attacks, and I think that there are a lot of people who are running that don't have ideas. All they have are emotions. They feel strongly about the issues that we're facing, and they don't know how to fix them, so instead they stand up, they blame everybody else in the room, and they never take accountability for how we're going to move forward when we fix it. We all huddle with our team on one side of the aisle or the other, but we never step up and propose ideas to move the ball forward for North Carolinians. We are quickly in this country and in this state approaching a time where we can no longer afford to have people with big feelings and small ideas. We have to have thinkers. We have to have people who are equipped to come to the table and lead the charge to fix these issues. So that's why I'm running. That's why I'm eager to serve this district and this state. Again, I'd like to try and keep this as short as I can. I'll give you my 3 priorities, and these are not necessarily my priorities. I'm a policy wonk. I'm an egghead by my nature, and I've come to embrace that. And so I'm happy, again, I've worked on criminal law issues, and I'm happy to tackle issues with the judicial system and how we can better fund it to ensure more efficiency in that. But the 3 things that I keep hearing about around the district are, first, inflation. I'll talk about just a couple of families that I've spoken with, the doors that I've knocked. I call them my why doors. They're the doors that remind me why I'm doing this. One of them was back in, I think it was in January during the primary, and I spoke to this family where the mother said, yeah, my husband lost his job last spring. He hasn't been able to find work. He's been driving DoorDash and Instacart. I've taken up 3 part-time jobs because we have 4 kids. And with the price of groceries right now, we still cannot afford to feed them. So some nights we'll skip dinner. We'll steal off to the pantry and have a peanut butter sandwich so that the kids can have more of the meal that we've made. Then this past weekend, I encountered another family. A young mother answered the door, 2 small children. And as I was talking to her, this was on a Sunday, she says, yeah, my husband's working. He works 2 jobs full-time. He barely gets to see his kids, but he has to so that we can afford groceries. He has to so that we can afford to keep the lights on. He shouldn't have to do that. That mother shouldn't have to skip dinner. That father shouldn't have to miss his children growing up because he's having to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. We are not, listen, inflation is a complex issue. It's going to require comprehensive federal solutions, the federal level. But there are things that we can do here at the state level to take care of that. We can cut taxes because we're receiving record revenues right now. We can cut taxes and afford to put more money back in North Carolinians' pockets. We can work with businesses to target regulatory cuts to lower prices. And that can be anything from lowering barriers to entry for small businesses that want to, somebody who wants to start a small business and make a way for themselves, set out their own shingle. Or it can be getting rid of some of the 2,200 mandates that we have on health insurance that drive the cost of health insurance up. If you wonder why small businesses can't afford to provide their employees with health insurance and stay competitive with their larger employers, a lot of it is because of these mandates. So, if somebody can afford to self-insure, they don't have to comply with all these mandates. The state can write itself out of these mandates, and the state has written itself out of a lot of these mandates. But small businesses have to bear the brunt of those regulations. So we can put money back in people's pockets, and we can lower costs with regulations. We're not going to sacrifice consumer safety, but we can target regulations, lower barriers to entry, and lower costs. That's issue number one. Issue number two is public education. We've got to take care of the 75 to 80% of students that are in public education. I was in public education, much like Dr. Ng. Public education for me was my way out. And specifically, and this is something that hurts because I look around and I've seen all of the arts programs that have been cut out. The band program was my way out. I hadn't planned on talking about this, but 2 days ago, the man who had served as my second father growing up, my band director, passed away in Alamance County. He was a huge influence in my life. That band room was a sanctuary for me, where I could grow and I could explore and branch out and try new things in music. He'd let me stand up and conduct the band, and it had to have been terrible. I had no idea what I was doing, but he gave me the confidence, and when I screwed up, he gave me the grace that I needed. Public education changed my life. My brother was a public educator for many years. We're losing a lot of very quality teachers in this state because we don't pay them enough, and because we're working on an outdated public education model. We've got to update that model. Yes, we have to pay our teachers more, but we also have to understand there are a lot of actors in this space that are dedicated to keeping things the way that they are. When we have a public education system that predates the Civil War, and we haven't updated it to match where we are now. I mean, our academic calendar is still largely based on the agricultural calendar. These are all antiques, and we need to update them. And we need to take care of our teachers, but paying them more isn't enough. We also have to update the professional model, give them opportunities to achieve in the classroom and find promotions without leaving the classroom, because that's where we leave. I mentioned my band director. He had left teaching band to go be an assistant principal. My brother left teaching and coaching so that he could go edit videos because he was making 2-3 times more. We've got to do right by our teachers. That doesn't stop at paying them more. We have to reform the way we do education in North Carolina. So inflation is number one, public education is number two, and number three is infrastructure. I won't say a whole lot about infrastructure right now, but we've got to do something about Capitol Boulevard. We've got to do something about Falls of News. We've got to do something about Lewisburg Road. We are leaving tons of opportunity for economic growth on the table by not addressing these issues. We have shot ourselves in the foot. And as we kick the can further and further down the road, it only gets more expensive. So there are some options that we can explore. Happy to talk about them if anybody wants to talk about how we can, again, we mentioned outdated formulas. The infrastructure formula, the STIP, is outdated. That Strategic Transportation Investment Plan, it's outdated. So again, happy to go more into this if somebody has a question about that, and I talk more about this. But I'm so delighted to be able to speak with you all about this. Again, my name is Mike Sheetzelt. If you have any questions, I know a lot of folks are probably streaming this at home. Go to my website, mikefor35.com. Look at the issues that I've put up there. If you see something on there, ask me a question. You got a piece of mail, you don't know what it's talking about, ask me a question. I'm an open book, and I'd love to tell you more about who I am and what I stand for. Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for the folks that are watching at home. My name is Jacob Arthur, and I am running for the Wake County Board of Commissioners District 6 seat. That seat covers some of North Raleigh, a little bit of Falls of the Neuse, kind of between Six Forks, Falls of the Neuse, down into Raleigh towards the Beltline, and then all of Wake Forest and the Falls of the Neuse, or Falls Lake area, all the way up to the county line, north and west. I'm a Wake County native. My wife is a Wake County native, born and raised here. We both grew up here. Actually lived about 2 miles apart, live about a mile. Now we kind of split between her family and my family. We love this county, love this state. Got 4 kids, kind of like Mike. I've got a son who's a 10th grader. I've got an 8th grade daughter, a 5th grade daughter, and a little kindergarten 5-year-old daughter as well. I was in public school just like these guys. My wife was a public school graduate. All of my kids are in public school here in Wake County as well. The reason I am running is because I'm extremely concerned about the future of this county. On the surface, I think things tend to look really good in Wake County. It's a good place to live. There's a lot of business here, a lot of activities, a lot of things for kids to do. When I was in school here, the school system was one of the top school systems in the country. There's just a lot going on here in Wake County, and it really is a great place to live. But when I look at the way the county is being run, I'm looking 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road, and what I see is what I see when I look out at the West Coast right now. I see a county that is spending way too much money. I see a county that's taking on way too much debt. I see a county with increasing property taxes year over year over year that is forcing residents to choose whether or not to stay in homes that they've been in for decades. You see that around the county right now in many places where we've got a ton of growth and a ton of building going on, but what is happening is in some of these particularly older neighborhoods where you've got families and individuals who have lived in homes for decades are being priced out of their own homes, not because they can't afford to pay for their home, but because they can't afford to pay for the taxes. That's a big concern for me, particularly at a time when something Mike talked about, inflation. You know, we've got things, everything costs more. I've got a family of 6. Groceries are expensive. We fixed, I went to the store last Friday night to buy stuff to make tacos for my family of 6 to make tacos. It was almost $100 to make them at home. You know, gas prices, everything costs more. And so on top of that, then I get my tax bill from the county, which went up for most people on average 40%. That's after they lowered the tax rate this year because of how much the home values had risen according to their methods. So at a time when people are really being hammered and hurt in the pocketbook, your county comes in and taxes you more because of what they want to spend. We've got a county budget that's $2.1 billion this last year, $2.1 billion. Almost $400 million of that is spent just servicing debt, so just paying for the county's debt. So $2.1 billion budget, and almost $500 million of that is just to pay for the debt that the county has. It's not sustainable. It can't keep going like that forever. And if you look at the county's budget projections over at least the next 4 years that they've put out, every year that budget is higher and higher and higher. The only way to deal with that and the only way for them to do that is to continue to tax our residents. And we just can't do it right now. People can't afford it. I'm really running, and that plays into one of the reasons I'm really running is it's prioritizing what we're doing as a county. I think we're at a time and we're at a position where we're going to have to make hard choices as a county on what we want to spend money on. Dr. Ng and Mike both talked about public education. As I mentioned, I'm a public school graduate. My kids are in public school. I ran for school board 2 years ago. I have a passion for public school. I'm extremely concerned about what this county is doing in our public schools. And it's not necessarily because of folks like Dr. Ng here who's trying to make the right decisions and work within the system that he's got to work in. But I think we've got to do a better job of prioritizing what we're doing spending on. 2 years ago, the county, as we sat in a budget meeting for the public school system, the budget presentation was going on, and they told the school system that you're getting ready to go off a fiscal cliff because you've taken temporary COVID money and used it for permanent positions. There's going to be about a $50 million shortfall there coming up when this federal money runs out. Well, now, because of the decisions that were made by the school board before Dr. Ng was on the board, But because of those decisions that were made, the county school system has to come back every year. This past year, they requested $58 million more, roughly $58 million more on top of what they got last year. 2 days into school this year, my son's school was canceled because the HVAC system wasn't working and the air conditioning was out. 2 days into school. Last year, we had a 4th grader in my daughter's class bring a gun to school. No elementary school in Wake County has a security officer unless the town that school is in provides it. We don't have enough sheriff's deputies in this county, so we don't have enough security to be able to provide to the schools through the sheriff's department. In the budget, they said we had about a 200 position deficit in the Wake County Sheriff's Department. This is a huge county. About half of those have been filled. I want to give credit to Sheriff Rowe. He has done yeoman's work trying to fill the positions he can with what he's got to work with. But again, it comes down to prioritizing. What do we think is important, and how are we going to prioritize it? If public schools and security and safety are important to us, those should be our main priorities as a budget. I love public libraries. I love park systems, but a park system doesn't keep my kids safe at school. A public library doesn't take care of the debt in Wake County. You'll see on your ballot this year a bond. Bonds are on your ballot almost every year, every election cycle, and they pass every single time. All a bond is you voting to tax yourself more. There's a bond on the ballot this year, a library bond. It's $142 million. Read it carefully when you look at your ballot, because it tells you what the anticipated actual cost is. It's not $142 million. It's $250 million is what it will end up costing you, at a time when we're already, as I said, servicing our debt at almost $400 million a year. So for me, this is all about priorities. It's prioritizing spending. It's prioritizing where we actually apply debt. I would prefer to say a bond on the ballot that is earmarked specifically for updating the HVAC systems in Wake County's public schools. There was an article that came out 2 days before my son's school closed for the HVAC issue that said that the system only has 14 positions for HVAC. 7 of those are filled, and they've hired 1 person in 14 years. That's unsustainable. I would venture to guess some of the HVAC systems were in place when I was in school here, going to the same high school my son goes to. So again, it's prioritizing spending to me. You want to put a bond on the budget? Let's put a bond on the budget to update the HVAC systems in Wake County Public Schools. I think that's something everybody would probably get behind. I don't mind paying a little extra in taxes if that's what we're going to do, but not to pay administrator salaries. I don't think that's necessary. So again, no new tax increases. I would actually like to see us put a cap on property taxes in Wake County so people actually know what they have coming. I would like to see those rolled back. If you've lived in Wake County any period of time, recently there was a report that the vice president had floated an idea about taxing unrealized capital gains. And just to kind of flesh that out for you, that's if you have stocks and those stocks values go up, but you don't sell them, just the value goes up, you would get taxed on what that value has increased. Now, even if they go down later, you've still paid taxes and probably lost money in the end. Well, if you live in Wake County and you've owned property here for any period of time and you haven't sold it, you've been taxed on unrealized capital gains, because they've told you that your house has been valued at such and such a rate, and you've been taxed on that rate, even though you haven't sold it. It's not done anything in the market. The next year, that value could plummet. And that brings me to my next point, is we are doing budgets right now in Wake County based on what property values are going forward. And so they're doing $2 billion budgets, next year 2.2 or 2.4, and on and on and on. Well, what happens if the housing market crashes and property values go down? Well, they've got to feed those budgets. How are they going to do it? They're going to tax you guys. They're going to tax me to feed those budgets. They're not going to cut anything. So again, tax increases, I want to stop those. Prioritize spending. I want to reduce our debt. I want to fund public safety adequately. I want to fund our public schools adequately and smartly. I think the school board and Dr. Wing would probably work with me, I'm sure, on that, but making sure that the money that the county is actually giving the public schools is used for the purposes that we want to see improvement in the public schools, not just write a blank check. So I'm happy to take questions. You know, my opponent is the chair of the Wake County Board of Commissioners. Her resume in government service looks a lot better than mine, to be honest with you, and she speaks eloquently about these topics when she does. But I'm just a dad, just a concerned citizen, and I would like to have an opportunity to serve this district going forward and make some common sense decisions. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from who? We have a question from R. Williams. What's the question? He said, what's wrong with the county? He says that it's growing by 51 people per day, 250,000 per decade in the past decade. What's wrong with that? What are they really asking? Oh, okay, okay. So the person was commenting to your comment about the way the county was being run, and he said, well, what's wrong with it? He says 51 people are coming in per day, and a 250,000 in the past decade.
Yeah, so like I said, and that according to the county, we're getting about 56 people a day are moving to Wake County. That's correct. As I said before, I think Wake County is a great place to be. People want to come to Wake County. I'm looking further down the road at what I see. When the property tax valuations came out earlier this year, there was a woman on a WRAL news article that I read. She had moved here from New Jersey. The reason she moved here was to escape the high property taxes in New Jersey. And so she got here and she's looking at a bill where her taxes went up almost 54% over last year. And she says, I can't keep doing this. She says, if these continue to go up like this, I'll just move again. They're going to move somewhere where property taxes are less. So even though we have more people coming here, that's true. I don't think that's sustainable, though, if we keep going in the direction we're going. We've got crime on the rise, property tax increases as far as the eye can see, and what I foresee happening down the road is we'll hit a peak where people have had enough, and then it's going to reverse itself and you'll start seeing people leave. And when people leave, then we'll have a dwindling tax base, but a government that's bloated in spending and debt. And the only way to take care of that will be to further tax and burden the people that are left here in this county. So, yeah, again, North Carolina is a great place. Wake County is right in the middle. We're in a sector where there's a lot of higher education. We're right next to RTP. There's a lot of technology in this area. But you're also seeing people moving to Johnston County. At over 800 people a month are moving to Johnston County. Mm-hmm. Property tax values are not what they are here in Wake County. And they're making a decision to move to Johnston County and commute rather than move into Wake County.
Right.
Thank you for the question.
You got anything? What's the other one? Okay. Okay, school board question for Mr. Wing.
Yes.
Okay, so the person online wants to know, because addressing your comment about punishment, how you feel about the isolation tactics that are currently being used. For what grade? So elementary and middle school children.
I personally am appalled that we have those tactics, especially for our kids with special needs, and those are the ones, you know, I see my friends who have kids with autism, who some of them are, you know, when they're in the elementary age, they may not be completely verbal, may not be able to understand what is going on in around them, and when a teacher is trying to explain or rationalize what what needs to be done, or how they should behave. They may not truly understand it. So it kind of ramps up that whole situation to the point where that child may lash out, and therefore that child has to go into a seclusion. And that is something that I find just very unsettling for those children. And so, you know, I think that the way to help with the situation, and I've mentioned that to the rest of the school board members, is that we need to have all of our teachers to be truly understanding of disabilities, and to be able to understand where they're coming from, where those children are coming from, and not just be so regimented in the way that they, this child has to behave this way. When some children just may not be able to understand what the rules are. So I really feel like, with some better training of all the teachers, not just the special ed teachers, but all the teachers, we can help to reduce those incidences.
Okay. Could you circulate that, Mike?
Sure. Yes. Let me ask a question. And there were a number of questions at our last meeting about education and funding for education, and the place that vouchers and the lottery come to play in education, and if that's really a benefit, or if that's makes it even more challenging for public education. So if you have any comments on vouchers and the lottery.
So since running for the General Assembly, I have some thoughts about the opportunity scholarships. First, let me talk about why they were important. Opportunity scholarships, the word opportunity is key. They were geared toward working class families whose children might not be thriving in public schools. And it gave them an opportunity to seek different opportunities for their child to thrive. There have been, I believe there's been a lot of misinformation about how they work, a lot of misinformation about how they're funded, and a lot of misinformation about who they are targeted toward. The General Assembly recently voted to expand opportunity scholarships this year to allow everyone who applied for an opportunity scholarship to receive something. Now, as the income bracket gets higher, the amount you receive is lower. I did not, and I've been vocal about this with hopefully my future colleagues in the General Assembly, I did not support that full expansion to make every single applicant a recipient. However, it's important to remember there were people on the outside looking in. As a matter of fact, I had this conversation with Jacob just last week. One of the couples that was on the outside looking in, one of the spouses was a teacher, the other one was a firefighter. If we consider them to be wealthy, and then in the next breath say we've got to pay our teachers and our firefighters and our state and public workers more, something's not adding up here. So I think there did need to be some expansion, and I think we need to ask ourselves why there is this demand amongst lower income families, amongst working class families, to provide different opportunities for their children. And it's not because our public schools have been thriving, okay? There are deep issues with our public schools. And we are not going to fix this with status quo arguments over things like teacher pay. It's one small piece of a much larger puzzle. We have a systemic issue with public education. It needs to be reformed in a way that will work for more children. And what I would love to see is for our public education system to be so strong that opportunity scholarships aren't in such high demand. I would love for working class families to say, the public schools are working for my children. And of course, the obvious rejoinder, the obvious rebuttal that I've heard over and over from people is, well, then why are you pulling money from the public schools to put toward these opportunity scholarships? Doesn't that money need to go to the schools? But if you look, 2 points to that. First, even with the opportunity scholarships, our education budget goes up year over year. And it's important to remember that. And second, whatever money is being used for that student, and let me use an example. I think it's best painted with an example. Let's say I have 2 children and I have $15,000 to educate them. My per pupil expenditure here is going to be $7,500, one half of $15,000, and that's about pretty close to the average of what the state spends per pupil expenditures. There's some from the county, there's some from the federal government, but let's just talk about the state right now because that's who funds the opportunity scholarships. If the state comes in, right, and I say one of my students finds an opportunity to go get their education, instead of that $7,500, they find it for $6,500. I've still got $8,500 now instead of that $7,500 for my other student. Per pupil expenditure here has gone up for this other student. And that's what happens with the opportunity scholarship. If you have somebody who's, $7,500 of state money is being spent to educate that student, and you pull them out of the system and give them $6,500, that extra $1,000 stays with the public schools. And so per pupil expenditure actually goes up. And that's something that's lost in this discussion. We say we're taking money from public schools. We're actually raising per pupil expenditures, which, by the way, per pupil expenditure, we spend more than $12,000 per student here in North Carolina. No, it is not the same as many of our neighboring states, but it is more than almost every single European nation right now is spending per student. So we've got to be focused on why that $12,500 isn't enough. There's a lot of money being poured into our public education system that's never making it down to the classroom. There's a lot of money that is not going to educate our students. And that's why, even though we're pouring 58% of our state budget into education, the majority of which is going to K through 12, we still have to go to the parents to ask them to buy crayons and glue sticks for the classroom. To me, that's absurd. There is something missing. There is some reason that this money is not getting down to the classroom. And so we have big issues with public education where we need to get that money down to the classrooms. We need to stop focusing on what every single constituency needs except the students and start focusing on student outcomes. And that's the problem with our public education debate. Thank you.
Dr. King, would you care to respond?
Sure. Being on the school board, I hear both sides, definitely there are people who believe that the money, public money, should go to public schools. Now, the other side would say that, well, the money follows the backpack, Mike was mentioning about, why do people have to seek another option? And there are, I see real cases where the children are just not getting their needs met, regardless of how hard the teachers, the principals try to meet their needs, that they're just not able to meet their needs, and they have to go somewhere. Or there is a bullying issue in the school, and it's just not being able to be resolved in a way that is satisfactory to the parents and to the child, really, safety. And so they seek somewhere else. And people's learning styles are different, where they need to have something that fits their learning style. And so the opportunity scholarships are there for those people who can't afford that option outside of public school. And my take on it to the rest of the school board is, our job is to really make public schools the best option for everyone. So if they have to look at all the options on the table, that they will choose public schools rather than choose the charter school or choose the private school. And many people are being homeschooled for this very same reason too. So of course, people who are homeschooled, they're not getting those dollars specifically, but certainly it is you know, you see some of the exodus from public school because there's some other deeper rooted problems that are not being addressed sufficiently for the individual families.
Can I say one more thing on that issue? I just want to go back to something I was saying earlier about how we need serious people leading us. And as I've talked to a bunch of different candidates out there, obviously I can't speak for any other candidate. There have been some really good candidates that I've spoken to on both sides of the aisle who are focused on both and approaches to solving issues, right? There are people who want to make schools about opportunity scholarships versus public schools. It has to be one or the other. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can do both. We can make sure that students whose needs are not being met in the public schools, because every one of us is different, every one of us has different needs. I have 4 children. My youngest is so sweet and docile. My oldest is always prepared to run through a wall. They have different needs, and we shouldn't be forced. If we don't have the means, let's say if I'm a family that did not have the means to put my child in a school that was better suited for him, I shouldn't be trapped by the fact that I don't have money. This is how we create opportunities for children to learn on more equal footing. But what Dr. Ng just said was so important. It's not opportunity scholarships and we're done. It's opportunity scholarships as a means to an end, and then find out how we can fix our public schools. But serious people need to be focused on both approaches to make sure that the needs of children are met.
Okay, I actually have 2 questions. I'm a mental health professional. I'm a behavioral health therapist. I overheard, and I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly, the special needs curriculum hasn't changed since 1983, 93. Okay, so there have been some major breakthroughs since 2015. So I am in support of you going in there and adjusting that, because if that's the case, then we're already starting behind. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, as a therapist and as someone who deals a lot with Medicaid clients, a lot of the kids, and I've heard this story a lot. So I'm a pattern person. My wife will tell you I don't look at incidents, I look at patterns. And one of the things that I've been seeing is you've got kids who are really trying to get an education, who are in an environment with bullies, and mostly I can't really speak to the high schools, but middle school, a lot of the approach seems to be to wipe their hands of it. They get rid of both parties. And so the person who is not starting the fight, who hasn't participated in the fight, gets kicked out of school. And the person who started the fight gets kicked out of school. But the person who didn't is like, okay, so I took hits, like I didn't defend myself, which is kind of, we're asking them, don't defend yourself, because if you participate in a fight, you're expelled or you're suspended. And the kid's like, okay, so if I don't defend myself, I get beat up, you're going to kick me out anyway. So there needs to be something done with that piece, and what your thoughts are on it. And I know, and in defense of the teachers, and in what you were saying, I know they're understaffed. They're understaffed, and yes, sir, they're underpaid, and there's a whole lot of responsibility on their shoulders. I'm not an advocate for law enforcement getting involved in the school system, so I really don't know where we're going to go with that, but there's got to be a solution.
Well, and mental health of the children is such a big issue right now, and we talk about it almost every single meeting in one way or another, because it impacts them. And I talk about the code of conduct that we need to look at more deeply, because bullying is a reality, and it's not just physical bullying. It could be just a look or a comment or something on on the Facebook or social media, and one of the things that I really am a big proponent of is looking at when children are really able to use cell phones in a sensible way, okay? Because I really feel like that when you give a cell phone to a young child, it is inviting that negative feelings to come into their hearts, because there's so much negativity on the social media, and they start comparing themselves to other people, and they feel like they're inadequate, or they're not good enough, or compared to their friends. And social media, people only show what's the best side of themselves. They never show what's the reality. And so they start having these issues with their own self-esteem. But then also, the cyberbullying that we're dealing with in a regular basis. And sometimes these bullying, gets introduced, the conflicts as a result of the cyberbullying gets introduced into the school. And so it really is a big problem for us. And one of the things that we, as a school board, has been talking about, we haven't made any kind of decision yet, but we're talking about what to do about cell phones in the school. And really also make it maybe a public service kind of a proposal to say, parents, you need to be really careful about how you use cell phones with your children, and also looking at the social media. The Wake County Public Schools actually joined a bunch of other school systems in a class action lawsuit against Meta and Facebook and all those other companies in accusing them of targeting children in their algorithms. And so I really want to make sure that we protect the kids, not just physically, but also mentally.
I have an online question for you. The House, right? Okay, what's the question? You mentioned lowering the barriers for small businesses, the entry level for small businesses. Okay, so are you concerned that that's going to lower the standards of safety and quality, and how that impacts those people that have met that bar?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways to go about doing regulatory reform, mentioning, lowering these barriers. There are ways that we can, first and foremost, there's just the blanket, everything's got to go, fire sale, get rid of the regulations, and it's just whatever goes. I think that's kind of a caricature. It's not what we're talking about when we talk about regulatory reform. It's about looking at what sorts of barriers are out there. There are some that serve important, I mentioned consumer safety, some that serve important consumer safety or worker safety purposes. We have to leave those in place. There are some times where I don't know where these regulations come from. Sometimes our regulators get bored, I suppose, and they put new rules, or one isolated incident happens and they decide we've got to have a new rule to address it. And I will tell you who that benefits, because it benefits two classes of people. It benefits larger employers that have a larger bottom line to comply with these regulations, and it benefits lawyers who get hired by these larger businesses, okay? I'm not about putting myself out of business, but if it makes more sense for our small businesses to get rid of it, I'm happy to take on less work, and yes, less pay, to make sure that more people have opportunity. Because that's what's missing in all of this. You might remember back in 2010, the Subway owner made a comment. If I tried to open Subway today, it would fail. He opened it 50 years earlier, in the 1960s, I think, and it had thrived. There was much less regulation back then. Some of the regulations that we've taken on since then serve important purposes, some have not. And so we've got to be careful about what we deregulate, what we get rid of, but we have to make sure we're trying to lower the barriers. And one of these barriers that I was mentioning earlier are the mandates for health insurance. If you're going to provide health insurance for your employees, you've got 2,200 different regulations that you've got to comply with in order to provide health insurance for somebody. You can't be competitive with larger employers if that's the regulatory burden you're facing.
By the way, the mic is to be passed around here. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions from the audience? I have a question, if I may. It's red. Is it working?
It's working.
Okay. Our most precious gift are our children and grandchildren. And all of you have touched on school safety. Would there be any place for tighter gun control? We've had over 35 shootings in the school systems around the country just this year. Would tighter gun control keep weapons out of children's hands?
My race won't really be able to do anything about gun control regulation, but I will say every school shooting that has happened has been in a gun-free zone. So, you know, I mentioned my daughter in her school a year ago had a fourth grader brought a gun to school. I don't know what kind of gun control regulation other than the parent left it out at home so that the child could bring it on a bus to school. Last week, got an alert that a student brought a gun on the school bus to my son's high school. There was a threat. Dr. Ng talked about school threats they're dealing with, and you've seen it in the news. Threats being made online against schools. Got an alert Sunday evening, that there was a threat against my son's high school made online. When I went to drop him off that morning, it was a very short carpool line because so many kids stayed home. After I dropped him off, I'm taking my daughter to middle school. I get an email on my phone saying that there was a threat that morning made against my daughter's middle school as I'm dropping her off. So stuff like that she ended up with 8 kids in each of her classes. So they didn't do anything. That's an entire day wasted. And this actually, I think, outside of the gun control, goes back to a point you were asking about earlier, about punishments and things with students, okay? And this is a general, broader statement, but we live in a society right now that is adverse to consequences. We do not want to punish anyone for fear of singling them out or hurting their feelings or making something seem disproportionate to their peers. I'm an advocate for if a child is doing something at school to harm someone, they're gone. They bring a gun to school, they're gone. Right now, I think it's a suspension for a year. It's 1 year. Personally, you don't come back to a Wake County public school, would be my position. If you bring a gun onto a Wake County public school campus, that's the end of your matriculation in Wake County public schools. You can apply for an opportunity scholarship. I think discipline in the classroom is a problem.
Is that the person online asked if that for a particular age or any age that do not come back?
I think you probably would have to set up a situation, and again, this won't be part of something I can control in my position I'm seeking, but you probably would have to take into account what the particular circumstances and the age of that person is. But I think certainly if you've got a student who is in middle school or high school that knows better and brings a gun to school.
So let me ask you a question to piggyback on that.
Okay.
All right, so our goal, I'm a goal-oriented thinker. Our goal is ultimately for children to get the education they need to become successful, self-sufficient adults. That's the parent's job. That's your end game, right? That kid has got to grow up to the point where they can take care of themselves and be a positive impact on society. So the question that I give to you, and I'm a gun owner, and I love, and I'll tell you that, and I'm ex-military. I've never, ever had a gun jump out of the locker and beat me up. Never happened. And I've had some pretty sophisticated firearms, and none of them have ever,
Same here.
you know, had mutinied and just caught me around the corner with a couple of rounds. The parents, this child that came to the school with a gun, that wasn't his gun. That was the parent's gun. And my concern, and a lot of people that speak on this, their concern is this: if that kid catches the consequences of the parent and doesn't get the education, what you have done is you have encouraged a criminal to continue in criminal activities. There's no correctiveness. There's just a penal system, and we already know penal systems don't work.
Right. Well, I think you kind of answered your question a little bit in the question. You said it's the parent's responsibility.
Right.
And I will tell you, having talked to teachers running for school board 2 years ago, Dr. Ng can probably tell you, we have a parent problem. And it's not just in Wake County. It's everywhere. We have parents who are not doing their job. A lot of the problems that public school systems face is probably something that a lot of us running for office, even though we want to fix, can't fix, because it's a problem that has to be fixed in the home.
In the home.
Now,
Okay.
with that said, I go back to my point on consequences. We're consequence adverse. So, yes, the student has to be punished. Absolutely, a parent that allows a student to get a hold of a gun and bring it to school, they have to be punished to the full extent of the law as well. But to your point, I think you make a valid point. We don't want to crush a child necessarily.
Or train a future criminal.
Or train a future criminal. But at the same time, we can't not have serious consequences because of the actions of a few affect the actions of everyone else.
Just a quick addition to it. You know, I agree that, you know, if there is any kind of gun regulation, it would be at home. And you know, we actually had as a school board, we advocated for publicly to make sure that, you know, there's a gun storage at home, so that everything is hidden away, and the kids cannot get access to it. Now, you know, you speak about the consequences of not, you know, if there's a, you know, if a child cannot get an education. I mean, we do have alternative schools in our system that will be there to, you know, as a way to provide some people who has misconduct to be able to still get education in a different setting. Now, if they bring in firearms, that's a whole nother, you know, it's a real deep, you know, concern. So, you know, we you know, as a school board member, we do look at some of those situations case by case to see how we can best continue to provide education for the kids and still provide the discipline that for their misconduct.
Just really quickly, I don't know that I have any answers to add on to that, but I do want to point out an important piece of the conversation that's going on here, which is that if we focus on gun control, we're missing the problem for the symptom. You said a gun didn't jump out of your locker and bully you in school. Listen, healthy children don't bring guns to school. Mentally healthy children aren't bringing guns to school and shooting at their peers. So there's something deeper going on. And we can try, you know, different regulations to take care of the gun problem. That's not going to stop the violence. And my brother taught in some challenging schools. And now he was well built for it. He's 6'3", about 300 and some odd pounds. He was an offensive lineman in college, a big guy, right? He can break up fights. But we have all of this violence in the schools right now where kids are fighting constantly, and they're encouraged to take videos of it and post it on social media. What is changing? And when are we going to start drilling down on what these deeper issues are? How can we, we've got to focus on these kids' mental health. And I hate to, I'm not trying to simplify the gun issue and say that it's just a mental health problem. But here in the schools, we never had a problem with that when I was growing up. And you know, there weren't school shootings prior to the mid-1990s. They were so rare. What's changed? And so we've really got to, and this can, something's got to give. And I think if we focus too deeply on the gun control component of this, we're missing the forest for the trees. There is a deeper malady afflicting our children, and we have to address that.
There are two questions here in the audience, but just if we're going to wrap it up here in about 10 minutes, if y'all want to be thinking about any closing statements you want to make.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I kind of have a two-part question for all three of you. It seems like the voters on November 5th have some hard choices to make. And from what I'm hearing, having listened to the opponents as well as you, is that there seems to be two camps. And the camp one is just throw more money at everything and keep doing the same thing. And the other camp says, no, let's try and find new ways of doing things because what we're doing isn't working. Which camp are you three in?
I'll go first. Talking about Wake County Board of Commissioners as a whole, Wake County Board of Commissioners have been run by one party for the last decade, since 2014. And I didn't really mention this in the beginning, but before this year, Wake County Commissioners, while you had to live in a district, so the current representative on the board lives in District 6 here, it's been an at-large race. So the entire county gets to vote, has been able to get to vote on your county commissioners for the last number of years. This year will be the first year you actually get to vote for your district representative only in your district. So what we've seen, at least over the last 10 years, is the people running Wake County are being, their actual constituents are from Raleigh and Cary mostly. Not out here representing the people that live in this area. Because we've been under single party rule in Wake County for 10 years, and I happen to be from the other party, I would say I'm somebody who's asking for, let's have a fresh voice come in, let's have a fresh set of ideas come in, somebody who can look at these problems a little bit differently from a different angle and just see if there are areas we can work together on, great. If I get elected, I'll be one person and I'll be outnumbered by 6 other folks. So I'm not going to get my way. That's just not going to happen. But at least I can be there and be a voice to sometimes look at things a little bit differently from a different perspective and just have a different set of ideas and maybe have a little iron sharpening iron and come to some better results.
Some problems require throwing money at it. We're not going to fix Capitol Boulevard on hopes and dreams. We've got to have the money for it. You know, maybe we can get creative about pulling it from federal sources and state sources. I don't know. But yeah, that's one of the things we have to look at. So if the problem is as simple as we just need to put more money into it, then, you know, yes, I'm a throw more money at it kind of person. But by and large, serious problems require serious people with serious ideas. I hate sounding like a broken record, but you have to have people who are willing to consider, well, are we throwing more money into a broken system? Are we raising the pay for teachers who are being hamstrung by a broken education system, for instance? Is there something deeper that we need to address? And so, you know, give you the lawyerly answer. Yeah, it depends. But I think by and large, we have to have people that are looking at problems holistically from all different angles. And this is why it's so important. I'll just take a step back. This is why it's so important to have conversations across the aisle with people. Because if I'm sitting in my caucus room with the Republicans and they all feel the same way about the issue and the Democrats all feel their way about it, you know, we better engage that conversation. They may not be able to stop us from pushing us through, but they may also stop us from making a huge mistake because we missed something important. right? And I'll give you an example of how this has worked out best in my life. I've been pro-life as long as I've known what abortion was. But one day, I had a conversation with somebody who said, I feel like people who are pro-life aren't actually pro-life, they're just pro-birth. You don't care what happens to that child. You don't care what happens to that mother. And I'll tell you, I've got 4 sisters. 2 of them were teenage mothers. One of them, after she had a child, then had an abortion. My mother was a teenage mother. I have 4 kids myself, and all 4 of those children born into a loving, healthy, stable marriage. I am a professional class. I'm a lawyer. I'm making decent money. And it's scary every time you have a child. I can only imagine being a young woman without that support system around her. What are you going to do? And so, maybe the answer there is to throw a little bit more money at it. To make sure, not throw money directly at the person, but put money into the community. Put money into community resources to provide prenatal care, to provide job training. Pour it into these organizations that are working directly with women, giving them the help that they need, and making them feel like there's somebody in their life who cares for them. Sometimes, from the government's perspective, it really is as simple as put more money into it. The problem is we're not having those conversations in the areas where that's the easy answer. We're having those conversations where we're just feeding a broken system.
Well, so going back to, spending the money, I'm kind of, where I want to put the money where it's most important. And, obviously the teachers have direct interaction with the children and teaching the children. So advocating for the teachers' salary increases is essential. Now, one of the things for me this past year, looking at the school budget, because that's one of the biggest responsibility we have on the school board, is looking at the budget. And we were at an impasse in terms of how we're going to pay for everything. And I looked at what they were proposing, and there were just like 3 measly human resource positions on the budget that they wanted to add for the upcoming this school year. And I said, well, if we wanted to really be devoted to increasing the teacher salary, let's put those off. Let's not fund those right now. And surprisingly, everybody agreed. And it actually stirred up a conversation saying, let's look at all the positions we have in the central office and see what is actually needed, what is extraneous. So we've got a commitment as a school board and from the superintendent to do a survey, external survey, to look at where the money, how much the salaries are, where there is fat that can be trimmed, and so I'm looking forward to that analysis, that report. Hopefully, I'll be on the board next, this coming year if I get reelected. That I can be there to see the results. But I'm excited to be able to take part in that and make those cases for rational use of our resources.
Okay, my question is for Dr. Ring, and I have 2 questions actually. The first one is, who makes the decision, and has a decision ever been made to give teachers pay based on merit, on how well the students are doing, or I don't know what all would be entailed in that? But that is my first question. The second question is, when I went to school, first of all, was back in the 50s, and we didn't have, I don't think, any of these problems that we're talking about today. But I know we had books, and I've heard it said, and whether it's true or not, that students today don't even use textbooks anymore. Is that true? And if so, why?
Well, that's true. The answer to your second question is yes. The children are relying more and more on computers, on laptops, to do their homework, and the curriculum is actually on the computer. There are sometimes that they have worksheets and all that, but usually it is on the computer. And it was one of those choices that the people before I came on, using the COVID money to have laptops for every single child. And that is a goal that a lot of educators wanted, a laptop for every child. That's another budgetary issue that I have in terms of how is that sustainable, because it is a lot of money being dumped into a technology that is obsolete the moment you pick up that computer. And then we have to have people to service those laptops. The laptops get lost, the laptops get broken, we have to replace them. And so it is a non-sustainable type of use of money. In terms of, what was your first question again? Yeah, so I mean, I think the laptops has a role in certain things, but I think I like seeing things on paper myself, and to be able to flip back and forth, to learn things that way. In terms of merit-based salary for teachers, I mean, there are some form of it, like in some of our Title I schools, where they try to attract the teachers to go to those schools, and if there is significant growth or performance improvement in those schools, then it would be able to attract, continue to pay the teachers more. With the Title I designation, it allows a greater flexibility in how the money is being used. So.
We have one more online.
All right, that'll be the last one. We're getting close to closing time. Go ahead.
Gentleman online wants to know what percentage. The gentleman online wants to know what percentage of the $26 billion budget, so this is a state question, actually goes towards education.
Right now, I believe it's about 58% goes to education. So 58 cents of every dollar goes to education. More than 40% of the budget goes to K through 12 education. And then, of course, you've got more that are for the community colleges and for the university system as well. So all of that's wrapped up into that. But it is fully more than half of our budget goes to education right now. And again, so it's not about, I don't think the problems that we're facing are about a shortage of money. I think the problem is that we're not putting those dollars to their most efficient use. You have to if I take my money and I go spend it on movie tickets, and I can't feed my kids because I'm buying movie tickets, I'm not putting my money to the most efficient use. What is the most efficient use? It's what's going to impact student outcomes. That is the highest, that is the only purpose for our public education system, okay? It's not to give people jobs, cushy jobs in administration, or it's not to employ certain, the purpose of education is to serve our children in two ways. Make them productive citizens in a republic who can sit here and engage in these kinds of conversations, who can read and write and think for themselves. And second, it's to make them employable. Right now, that high school diploma means almost nothing. It meant almost nothing when I graduated. That bachelor's degree means absolutely nothing. I was joking back there that, well, listen, I got a music degree in 2008. Horrible time to graduate with any degree, but trumpet performance doesn't really qualify you to do much in the Great Recession. But still, my first job with that fresh bachelor's degree, with a second out of 7 kids to graduate college, And what was my first job? Man, I was dressing like the Statue of Liberty, flipping a sign on the side of the road for Liberty Tax to pay my rent. Because you have to do what you have to do. But if that's what a bachelor's degree can get you, then we're in a big problem. We've got to fix that. And so we've got to do something about our public education. We've got to make that high school diploma mean something. Because if it doesn't mean anything, then why do we expect kids to finish? Why do we expect kids to stay in school? What do they really get out of that? Congratulations, you get to go on to the next level and incur a whole bunch of student debt to go get an undergraduate degree. That's crazy. So we've got to make that mean something.
All right. Mr. Arthur, would you like to start with our closing comments, please?
Yeah, I'll be brief. Again, thank you guys for having us here tonight. For everybody who's watching online, I really appreciate it. Fantastic questions as well, so I appreciate that as well. Again, my name is Jacob Arthur, Wake County native, husband. I'm also a dreaded attorney like Mike here. Navy veteran, father of 4, deeply concerned about the place I live. I would like my kids to grow up and be able to live here as well if they so choose, but preferably not in my house. I want them to be able to afford to live in Wake County and want to live in Wake County and raise kids in Wake County like my wife and I have. If you are comfortable with the status quo and you are comfortable with ever-increasing property taxes, ever-increasing spending, and ever-increasing debt in Wake County, I am probably not your candidate. I'll just go ahead and tell you that right now. But if you are looking for some fresh ideas and a fresh perspective from somebody who's lived here his entire life and seen the rapid growth that has happened here and has an outlook towards the future, not just the next budget, I would ask for your vote. You can go to jacobarthurforwake.com, jacobarthurforwake.com. That is my website. You can see some more about my policy positions and get some more information about me. And thank you again for having us.
Thank you all again for having us here this evening. I, too, will be as brief as I can, as brief as a former law professor can be. My name is Mike Sheetzel. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I'm a father of 4. I'm an attorney in Raleigh, and I am running just as hard as I can to represent this district. I love this place. I love the people here. And one of the great thrills over the last 9 months that I've been running is talking to people at their door, coming to events like this, and fielding questions from people. I spoke earlier, and I've said multiple times, we've got a lot of people in politics with big feelings but no ideas. When you have people with big feelings and no ideas, who are they accountable to? They're going to be accountable to the party. They're going to be accountable to the leadership in their chamber. They're going to vote the way, if they're told to press the red button, they're going to press the red button. If they're told to press the green button, they're going to press the green button. That is not who I am. And as the representative for District 35, you may not always like the way I vote on policy, but I will always be accountable to you. When I was in the Marine Corps, they always told us, you may not always make the right decision, but you need to be able to explain that decision. If you can explain that decision, then you're in much better shape than you otherwise would be. So I've had this conversation with Republicans, I've had this conversation with Democrats, I've had this conversation with unaffiliated voters. My commitment to you is that if I press the button in a way you don't like, I press the wrong button from your perspective, I will always have an explanation for you as to why I did it. And you are always free to reach out to me and find out why I voted the way that I did. My name is Mike Sheetzel. My website is mikefor35.com. If you're listening tonight, or I encourage you to go, maybe you come up with a question later that you didn't get to ask tonight, go to my website, fill out the form there, send me your question. I'll email you. If it's super sensitive and I say, man, something might get lost in translation, I'll call you. Don't believe me? I've done it to others. I'm happy to have these conversations. I get life and energy from these conversations, and I'm so grateful to you all for opening up your doors tonight. Thank you.
So my name is Wing Ing, last name is NG, as in the next generation. That's my slogan. And you know, it's just, I feel like it's come full circle. You know, I ran 2 years ago to be a voice for people who didn't have a voice, and I want to continue on that journey to be a voice for all of our the parents and to be able to have a common sense viewpoint. And you know, I look at, you know, people talk about diversity, and I really believe diversity is important. Diversity of opinions, diversity of thought, and so I hope to be able to be on the school board again, to continue to be a part of that conversation, to have a different viewpoint, something that, you know, may, you know, still further the cause of getting a great education for our children, but in a more common sense fashion. So again, my name is Wing Ng, and my website is wingforwakeschools.com. So take a look at my website. Thank you.
All right. Let me, just in closing, thanks again to Reverend Bullock and the members of Evans Grove Baptist Church, and also the candidates. I have a quote that I believe represents well all of the candidates we've heard from, and I challenge those of us that are here tonight and those online to step up and follow this quote. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. That's from a wise philosopher, Dr. Seuss. So keep that in mind. Just a few important dates. Absentee ballots should be issued in the next couple of weeks. October 17th is the first in-person early voting date. And then don't forget the election day of November the 5th. So again, thank you all for coming, and I'm sure the candidates would be willing to hang around for a few more minutes for questions. So thank you all, and hope you have safe travels back home. Be sure to vote.
Okay, so we're going to have a closing prayer.
Yes.
Father God, we thank you, Lord, that you reward of those who diligently seek you, Father. We ask, praise God, that thy spirit be upon hearts and minds, Father, affect thought, affect actions, Lord, and affect choices and decisions, Father. Always keeping you first, Father. Remind us of who you are and what you would have us to do, Father. We will be ever so mindful to obey in Jesus' name. Amen.